Have you ever walked into a room and felt the noise before a single word was spoken, voices competing, eyes scanning, everyone trying to be seen, yet the one who says nothing seems to hold the entire room? Stillness has its own gravity. It's not silence, it's control. Stay with me, and you'll understand how quiet becomes the sharpest weapon of all. As we step into the first chapter, picture a crowded room filled with restless energy. Conversations overlap, laughter rings out too loud, and somewhere in that chaos, one person stands silent. They do not need to raise their voice, yet attention bends toward them like metal drawn to a magnet. There's an invisible current around them. What you feel isn't mystery, it's mastery. Now ask yourself, why do some people command a room without saying a word? Why does silence, when carried with confidence, speak louder than noise? The Stoics had an answer. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts." The still person, the one who does not rush to fill every gap, has already mastered the battlefield within. Their thoughts are calm, and so their presence is unshakable. There's a reason the quiet ones are often underestimated. In a world addicted to sound, they seem invisible. Yet invisibility is their strategy. When others chase attention, they study attention. When others perform, they observe. Stillness is not the absence of motion. It's the refusal to move without meaning. The wise learn to conserve their words, their energy, their gaze, and in doing so, they gather a power few understand. I once met a man who led hundreds of people, yet when he entered a meeting, he barely spoke. He would listen as everyone tried to impress him, tried to prove their worth through volume. Only when the noise had exhausted itself would he finally lift his eyes. A single sentence from him would carry more weight than all the words that came before. It wasn't charisma, it was control. He didn't rush to speak because he didn't need to. His calmness wasn't a lack of response, it was his weapon. This is the paradox the Stoics knew well. The less you need to prove, the more undeniable you become. Stillness is magnetic because it is rare. Most people scatter their energy in every direction, seeking validation, agreement, or victory in petty debates. But the one who stands rooted, centered in purpose, doesn't need the crowd. The crowd needs them. Seneca once said, "To be everywhere is to be nowhere." Presence isn't about being seen, it's about being felt. When your mind is scattered, your energy leaks. But when you collect yourself, when every thought, every gesture, every breath aligns, you become impossible to ignore. People may not know why, but they sense it. They feel your steadiness like a pulse beneath the noise. Think of a warrior before battle. The inexperienced one trembles, eager to strike first, afraid of silence. The seasoned one stands still, sword lowered, breathing slow, eyes calm. He knows that movement born from fear is wasted. The same rule applies in conversation, in business, in every moment where power exchanges hands. The first to react usually loses. The one who waits, who watches, who measures before striking, that's the one who controls the outcome. When you speak, let it be deliberate. When you move, let it carry intention. The Stoics taught that mastery begins not in conquering others, but in governing yourself. If you cannot remain composed in front of noise, how will you face chaos? If you cannot hold silence in your favor, how will you command respect from those who live in distraction? Stillness is not weakness. It is preparation. It's the pause before precision, the quiet before clarity. Every time you resist the urge to prove, you are sharpening your presence. You are saying, without words, I am not moved by noise. And when people feel that, they stop talking. They start listening. Imagine yourself walking into your next room, a meeting, a gathering, a confrontation. Do not rush to fill the air. Let silence arrive first. Let it work for you. Look around and breathe. The loud will try to dominate, the insecure will fidget, but you will anchor, because the person most at peace always holds the most power. That is how presence works. It isn't a skill, it's a signal. It tells the world that you belong to yourself, that you are not for sale, not for persuasion, not for panic. It's the quiet declaration of someone who no longer chases validation because they have already found something greater, control. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself each morning, "Be like the rock against which the waves continually break, yet it stands firm." That is presence. Be like the mountain above clouds. Storms rage below, but its summit stays in sunlight. And in that calmness, the room will bend toward you. Not because you forced it, but because stillness always conquers motion that lacks purpose. This is where your transformation begins. Not by speaking louder, not by demanding to be seen, but by learning to hold your ground in quiet confidence. Because the room doesn't belong to the loudest, it belongs to the calmest. And once you understand that, you no longer compete for space. You become the space itself. From here, we move deeper into the unseen advantage of stillness, how silence, when used with awareness, becomes your sharpest form of observation. Moving into the second chapter, imagine this: the same crowded room, but now you stand silent at its edge. You are no longer a participant, you are a mirror. Every glance, every twitch, every word out of place begins to reveal its meaning. The noise that once blinded you now becomes data. This is the power of stillness. It gives you eyes that others don't know they've lost. Here's where the Stoic learns to see without judgment, noticing without needing, understanding without reacting. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Observe constantly that all things take place by change. To observe is to honor this truth, to witness life unfolding instead of trying to control its every turn." Most people fail here. They are so busy trying to be seen that they forget to see. Observation isn't passive, it's an art. It's what separates the impulsive from the wise, the loud from the powerful. When you observe, you move from the center of noise to the center of truth. You stop reacting and start reading the world as it is. I remember a man I used to work with, sharp suit, louder voice. Every meeting was his stage. He'd interrupt, dominate, impress. But there was another man, quiet, often sitting near the back. He barely spoke, but when he did, everyone listened. I once asked him how he managed to speak so little, yet command so much attention. He smiled and said, "Because I spend 90% of the time listening, not to words, but to motives." That line never left me. Listening to motives, that's what true observation is. It's not about catching mistakes or memorizing details. It's about reading the unseen currents beneath people's words. The insecurity hidden in confidence, the hunger masked as kindness, the fear disguised as anger. Stillness sharpens your senses until you can hear what isn't said. Seneca taught that we suffer more in imagination than in reality. Observation destroys that illusion. When you observe carefully, you stop living in assumptions. You see the situation clearly, free from the distortions of pride or fear. You stop guessing what people think of you and start seeing what they actually show you. Picture a negotiation table. Two people face each other. One fidgets, speaks fast, tries to dominate the air. The other waits, watches, says little. Guess who holds control? The calm observer always wins because they act from clarity, not from impulse. In every encounter, the one who listens longer and speaks later owns the direction. Observation is not only about others, it's also about yourself. The Stoics called this self-scrutiny, the daily practice of watching one's thoughts like a disciplined guard at the gate. When you learn to observe your reactions before they become responses, you are no longer a prisoner of emotion. You become its master. Epictetus said, "If someone succeeds in provoking you, realize that your mind is complicit." That's why the quiet ones rarely fall into traps. They see manipulation before it lands. They notice when a person tries to bait them, to draw them into chaos. They step aside and let noise defeat itself. There's a scene I often think of: two men walking through a market in ancient Rome. One is ranting about prices, politics, and people. The other listens, eyes calm, studying the movement of the crowd. Later, a fight breaks out nearby. Chaos unfolds, and the quiet man is already gone. He saw it coming minutes before. That's what stillness does. It gives you foresight, the ability to sense before the storm hits. In a world addicted to reaction, being observant makes you dangerous in the best way. It's how you read timing. It's how you choose your words precisely when they matter most. When you're silent, people reveal themselves. They rush to fill the void you leave. They expose their fears, their agendas, their truth. You don't have to interrogate anyone. You just have to watch them long enough. So next time you enter a room, don't rush to speak. Study. Notice who looks for attention, who avoids eye contact, who mimics the energy of whoever's dominant. Listen for the small hesitations, the sighs between sentences. Those are the places where honesty hides. Most people miss them because they can't bear silence long enough to hear it. Observation isn't about outsmarting others. It's about outsmarting your own impatience. The one who can watch without reacting holds the advantage that no force can take, because the world reveals its secrets not to those who shout, but to those who wait. When you cultivate this awareness, you become like the ancient Stoic, standing in the marketplace, unshaken while the crowd roars. You see what others can't, and because you see, you choose better. Every decision becomes cleaner. Every response becomes measured. Every move becomes intentional. The quiet observer doesn't need to control the world. They only need to understand it. And that understanding, earned through stillness, is what makes them untouchable. The wise know this truth: you cannot control what you do not first see. So see clearly, listen deeply, let your stillness become your lens. For the one who masters observation no longer follows the room, they lead it, quietly. And from this awareness, we move towards something even sharper: how to use that calm to seize control of time itself, the rhythm of words, pauses, and presence. Because when you control the tempo, you control everything. Advancing to the third chapter, the air grows quieter. You can feel it, the moment before words are spoken, before movement begins. Every conversation, every encounter has a rhythm. Most people rush into it, tripping over their own urgency. But the Stoic waits. They know that whoever controls the rhythm controls the room. Imagine standing across from someone who challenges you, maybe a boss, a rival, or someone desperate to prove their dominance. Their tone sharpens, their volume rises, their gestures cut through the air. Every move is meant to provoke you, to drag you into their tempo, but you stay still, you breathe once, you let silence expand until it becomes uncomfortable. They fill it with more noise, revealing everything they're trying to hide. That's when you see it, the moment power shifts without a word spoken. This is what Epictetus meant when he said, "No man is free who is not master of himself. To master yourself is to master time." To decide when to speak, when to pause, and when to move. Most people surrender that power without realizing it. They react instantly, their emotions deciding for them. But a Stoic understands, he who controls the pace dictates the outcome. I once watched an older craftsman teach a young apprentice how to shape iron. The apprentice struck the metal too soon, too fast, eager to finish. Sparks flew, but the blade bent. The master said nothing. He waited until the boy's frustration burned out. Then he took the hammer, struck once, slowly, and the sound changed. It wasn't just noise anymore, it was rhythm, timing, precision. "You see," the master said, "force without timing is chaos." That's how it works with people too. The loud hit first. The wise hit right. Every word you speak should be a hammer strike, calculated, controlled, landing exactly where it must. Silence is your forge. If you fill it too soon, the metal cools before it takes shape. But if you wait for the right heat, even a single strike can leave a mark that lasts. We live in a world that rewards speed, fast answers, instant reactions, quick wins. But Stoicism whispers the opposite. The slower your pulse, the stronger your presence. When you slow down, you shift from reacting to directing. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Take time to deliberate, but when the time for action comes, stop thinking and go in." Stillness doesn't mean hesitation. It means readiness. It means you're not owned by haste. Think of conversation as a current. Most people let it pull them wherever it goes. They rush to fill silence because silence feels like sinking. But the Stoic floats above it, watching the flow. When they finally speak, it's like a stone dropped into still water. The ripples carry farther because they began from calm. In the world of negotiation, this principle wins wars. I once read about a leader who would pause for 5 seconds before answering any question in a meeting. 5 seconds of silence, barely anything, yet everyone who spoke to him confessed that those pauses made them nervous. Why? Because silence forces reflection. It gives the impression of depth, of calculation, even when none is intended. But for the Stoic, it is intended. It is mastery disguised as patience. Your tempo is your unseen language. When you speak quickly, you signal anxiety. When you rush to reply, you show that the other person controls you. But when you take your time, when you speak from stillness, you project authority. You tell the world, "I decide the pace of my own mind." Seneca warned, "He who is everywhere is nowhere." The same is true in speech. Scatter your words, and they lose force. Slow them down, and they gather weight. Each pause is a statement that you are unbothered by silence. You no longer fear the empty space because you've learned that space is where influence grows. I've seen this in moments of tension, the way a person who stays calm under attack instantly shifts the balance of power. The aggressor begins to stumble, unsure why their words no longer land. They expected fire. You gave them stone. They wanted a reaction. You gave them rhythm. To control tempo is not manipulation, it's alignment. You're not bending others to your will, you're refusing to bend to theirs. You become the metronome in a chaotic orchestra. Every emotion, every word around you begins to unconsciously follow your beat. That's the secret of command, not volume, not dominance, but stillness that dictates movement. The next time someone tries to rush you, pause, feel the moment stretch, watch how quickly they reveal themselves. People who crave control can't stand stillness, it exposes them. But for you, it's home. Because you understand that power doesn't shout, it waits. So take your time, speak less, mean more, let your silence breathe, let your rhythm slow the world down until you decide it's time to move. The Stoics taught that mastery begins within, but here, in control of tempo, mastery becomes visible. It's the bridge between inner calm and outer influence. And from this mastery of rhythm, we move deeper into the battlefield of emotion, where stillness no longer just shapes time, but disarms manipulation itself. At this stage, the light shifts, the noise fades, you've learned to hold your ground, to see clearly, to control the tempo. Now comes the hardest test of stillness, facing people who feed on chaos, the ones who provoke, insult and twist your calm to steal your control. They don't fight with fists, they fight with reactions. Now imagine this. You're sitting across from someone who knows exactly how to get under your skin. They say something sharp, something calculated. The air thickens, and every instinct in you screams to defend yourself, to correct the lie, to fight back. But you don't. You take one slow breath. You let their words hang in the air, unreturned. And suddenly they start to crumble. Because silence isn't surrender, it's exposure. This is where the Stoics' armor is tested, not in isolation, but in confrontation. Epictetus once said, "When someone provokes you, remember that it is your judgment that provokes you. The insult doesn't wound you, it reveals you." What they throw is noise. What you hold is discipline. Emotional detachment isn't coldness, it's clarity under fire. I once saw this unfold at a dinner table. A man, wealthy, proud, mocked another guest's profession, laughing loud enough for everyone to hear. The target of his cruelty didn't defend himself. He just looked at the man once, then turned back to his meal as if the insult hadn't landed. The laughter died quicker than it started. Within seconds, the room's attention shifted, not to the aggressor, but to the calm one who refused to dance in another man's chaos. That's the essence of Stoic power. You don't fight for dignity, you embody it. When you refuse to be baited, you take away their weapon. People who rely on provocation collapse without an audience. They need your energy to survive. Take it away and you strip them of control. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Choose not to be harmed, and you won't feel harmed." He wasn't dismissing pain. He was reminding us that emotional sovereignty is the highest form of freedom. You can't stop people from striking, but you can decide whether the blow lands. Detachment doesn't mean indifference. It means seeing through manipulation without feeding it. The Stoic doesn't fight in the mud, because he knows even victory there stains the soul. Instead, he steps back, analyzes the game, and lets the other player defeat himself. That is not weakness. That is mastery. There's a story I often think about, a young philosopher in Athens who was insulted daily by a rival. One morning, the rival spat in his face in front of others, waiting for an explosion. The philosopher wiped his face, smiled faintly and said, "That is all you could give?" The crowd went silent. The rival left humiliated, not because he was overpowered, but because he was ignored. The philosopher's calm became his counterstrike. That's the paradox of composure. The less you react, the more powerful you become. Because when people can't control your reaction, they can't control you. It's simple, but not easy. Your ego will whisper, "Prove them wrong." Your pride will say, "Don't let this slide." But pride is the leash they pull. The Stoic sees the leash and cuts it. When someone tries to provoke you, see it for what it is, a test, not of them, but of you. The person who remains calm in conflict is not detached from life. They are deeply engaged with it. They have chosen mastery over motion, peace over performance. Seneca called this the discipline of delay, the pause that keeps wisdom alive while emotion burns itself out. In a world of noise, detachment feels like rebellion. Everyone wants a reaction. Social media thrives on outrage. Relationships twist around emotional tug-of-war. But you must become the still lake that reflects storms without being touched by them. The more chaotic the world becomes, the more your calm unsettles it. I've learned that nothing disarms manipulation faster than indifference to outcome. When you no longer need to win, you cannot be played. When you no longer seek validation, flattery loses its grip. When you no longer crave peace from others, you stop giving them the power to disturb it. That's what makes stillness so dangerous to those who thrive on control. They cannot break what bends to nothing. So, the next time someone throws shade, bait, or disrespect, pause. Don't explain. Don't argue. Let silence answer for you. Their frustration will reveal who they are. Your calm will remind you who you've become. Because in the end, emotional detachment isn't the absence of feeling, it's the presence of wisdom. It's the quiet awareness that no one can drag you into their storm if you've learned to live above the weather. And from this place of inner control, we move toward a subtler form of power, the kind that turns silence itself into influence, where your words become few, but your presence speaks louder than any noise. From here, the atmosphere shifts again. The storm of confrontation fades, leaving behind a rare stillness, the kind that separates those who speak to be heard from those who speak, because silence has finished its work. This is where power changes its form. It's no longer about holding ground or deflecting chaos. It's about presence, the invisible weight of someone who doesn't need to fill the room with sound to fill it with meaning. Now imagine this, you're in a conversation where everyone's talking over one another. Ideas fly, voices overlap, each person desperate to be acknowledged. And then you speak, once, not louder, not faster, just clearly, calmly, after everyone else has run out of words. The room stills. People turn. Why? Because silence has already framed your voice before it even arrived. Seneca once said, "The better part of courage is discretion." The same truth applies to speech. The more you restrain it, the sharper it cuts. When you speak only when necessary, your words stop being noise. They become decisions. I remember meeting a mentor years ago who hardly ever talked in meetings. He would sit back, hands folded, eyes moving between people. When he finally did speak, he didn't raise his tone. But every person in that room leaned in. It wasn't charisma, it wasn't authority, it was scarcity. His words were rare, so they carried value. Silence was the frame that made them shine. That's what people forget. Words are currency. The more you spend, the less they're worth. Stillness is what makes them expensive. When you learn to use silence as part of your speech, you stop being another voice and become an experience. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Let your speech be sound, not show." Yet today the world is drowning in show, people talking to prove intelligence, to display confidence, to hide insecurity. The Stoic does the opposite. He speaks from necessity, not ego. Because he knows this truth, you can't impress anyone by trying to. You impress them by not needing to. Think of silence as a mirror. It reflects back what others try to project. When you're quiet, people reveal themselves. The insecure will rush to fill the space with noise. The wise will wait with you. And in that waiting, mutual respect is born. There's a story about a Roman philosopher who was invited to speak before the Senate. He stood in silence for so long that one senator mocked him, asking if he'd forgotten his words. The philosopher finally replied, "No, I was deciding whether this moment deserved them." The room fell silent. Because sometimes the most powerful statement you can make is restraint itself. In your life, you'll meet those who mistake your silence for weakness. Let them. Because the moment they underestimate you, you gain the advantage of surprise. Stillness hides strategy. And when you do speak, when you finally choose to reveal your thought, it lands with the weight of a blade, unsheathed only once. But silence isn't just a tactic, it's a teacher. It forces you to confront yourself. It reveals what's behind your need to be heard, to be liked, to be right. When you can sit in silence without anxiety, you've already conquered half of yourself. And that self-mastery is magnetic. People feel it even when you say nothing. The Stoics believed that restraint was a virtue because it preserved your energy for what mattered. Every time you resist the impulse to explain, to defend, or to impress, you reclaim a piece of your peace. You withdraw from the noise and re-enter the present moment, where clarity lives. In silence, you stop performing and start perceiving. You begin to notice what's real, the truth behind words, the tone beneath intentions, the space between actions. And that awareness gives your presence substance. When you finally do speak, people feel the difference. It's not just sound, it's conviction. So, speak less, mean more. Don't rush to fill the gap. Let your quietness unsettle, inspire, or awaken curiosity. Let it speak for you long before your words arrive. Because silence, when carried with strength, becomes your signature. Your proof of inner order in a world of outer noise. And remember this, the wise do not seek to be heard, they seek to be understood. The loud demand attention, the calm command it. As we leave this stage of silence as value, we step toward the deepest layer of stillness itself, the one that no longer depends on the world's reaction, where peace becomes your nature. And movement begins from the inside out. Entering the final chapter, the noise of the world feels distant now. You've walked through the outer forms of stillness, control of speech, rhythm, emotion, presence. But this is where the real work begins. The battlefield turns inward. Because silence in the world means little if your mind still screams inside. Now imagine standing in a crowded street at dusk. Cars pass, people hurry, lights flash, but your breath remains steady. Around you, everything moves, yet inside you, nothing stirs. That moment is not emptiness, it's freedom. The Stoics called it mastery of the self, the art of remaining untouched in a world that never stops touching you. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Nowhere can man find a quieter or more untroubled retreat than in his own soul." He understood that stillness isn't about escaping noise, it's about carrying peace wherever you go. The truly powerful are not the ones who dominate the room, they're the ones who no longer need to. I once met a man who'd lost everything, his job, his home, even his closest friends. Yet he smiled with a kind of calm that unsettled people. When I asked how he managed it, he said, "Because I stopped confusing control with peace. I don't own what happens. I only own how I meet it." That stayed with me. We chase control thinking it will give us calm, but it's the other way around. Calm gives you control. This is the essence of inner stillness. You stop trying to rearrange the world to suit your moods. You learn to adjust your mind instead. Seneca called it living according to nature, which means accepting that storms will come, people will disappoint, and outcomes will twist. But none of it has the power to disturb you unless you hand them the key. True stillness is not silence of sound. It's silence of struggle. It's when your mind no longer argues with reality. When you stop saying, "This shouldn't have happened," and start asking, "What can I do with what has happened?" that's the pivot where suffering turns into wisdom. Epictetus said, "Make the best use of what is in your power and take the rest as it happens." Inner stillness is the practice of doing exactly that, seeing clearly where your control ends and refusing to bleed energy beyond that line. Most people live in resistance, fighting everything they cannot change. The Stoic moves differently. They observe, adjust, act once, and let go. Picture the sea during a storm. The surface thrashes, waves crash, winds howl, but dive deep enough, and it's still. That's what you must become, the depth beneath your own storms. People may misjudge you, events may shift overnight, plans may collapse. But if your peace depends on those, it was never peace, it was permission borrowed from chance. When you reach this point, something strange happens. You no longer need to prove calmness. It radiates. You stop trying to control others. They start steadying themselves in your presence. You become the still center of every storm, and that is the rarest kind of leadership, the kind born not from dominance, but from discipline. There was once a Roman general who faced betrayal by his closest ally. The entire camp expected rage. Instead, he walked outside his tent, watched the dawn rise and said, "If men can't be trusted, the sun still rises." Then he gave his next order, calm as ever. He didn't ignore pain, he mastered it. That's the face of inner stillness, acceptance without surrender, motion without turmoil. The more you cultivate it, the more you realize how little you truly need. You don't need everyone to agree. You don't need every outcome to bend your way. You just need to remain aligned with reason, clarity, and purpose. The Stoics called this eudaimonia, a state where virtue replaces desire, where your peace no longer negotiates with circumstance. So ask yourself, what shakes you? What do you still depend on to feel safe, respected, or whole? Then imagine standing without it, still unbroken. That is where stillness begins, because you cannot be moved by what you no longer rely on. When you master inner stillness, the world loses its power to manipulate you. Praise won't lift you too high, and criticism won't pull you too low. You become balanced, like a scale that measures but does not tilt. You live, act, and speak with a quiet conviction that no noise can imitate. Remember this truth: the Stoics' victory is not over others, but over turmoil itself. Outer control fades, fortune changes, crowds forget. But the mastery within you endures. And when you carry that stillness everywhere, you no longer need to outsmart the room. You've outgrown it. Stillness is not the absence of movement, but the mastery of it. When you no longer chase noise, the world starts to move around your calm. That is the quiet power the Stoics lived by. If this message resonates, subscribe to keep strengthening your inner stillness. Comment silent power to remind yourself what true control feels like. Stay steady, stay aware, and I'll meet you in the next reflection where silence turns into strength.